Hello and welcome to KQED Newsroom. I'm Thuy Vu. On our show, Xavier Becerra, a leading Latino lawmaker on Capitol Hill, discusses immigration reform and the importance of the Latino vote. Also, the latest on Apple's encryption standoff with the FBI and other top stories coming out of Silicon Valley. And how safe is California's drinking water? We'll talk to a reporter about why she tested her own water. But first, Republican candidates squared off in Miami last night for their latest debate as Donald Trump continues his stronghold in the race for the White House. Trump's controversial remarks have led to fissures in his own party and prompted concern among Republicans in Silicon Valley and elsewhere. I'm joined now by KQED senior politics and government editor Scott Shafer, and also by Sean Walsh, a Republican strategist who works with former California governors Pete Wilson and Arnold Schwarzenegger. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Sean, let's begin with you. Your reaction to this morning's announcement from Ben Carson that he is endorsing Donald Trump. This is a man who has compared Carson to a child molester, said he's super low energy, among other insults.
It's not a surprise. Just as we saw Governor Christie endorse Donald Trump, I think they're seeing the writing on the wall and which way this is going, and they're putting themselves in a fairly good political position and making themselves relevant for the rest of the political process this year.
Scott, prominent Republicans like Mitt Romney are waging an all-out campaign against Trump. What role is California playing in that?
Well, at this point, it's sort of low-key because our primary is not until June. I mean, you are seeing, for example, Ron Nearing, the former party chair, is the national spokesman for Ted Cruz. But, you know, just coming back for a moment to that Ben Carson endorsement today, you noticed how reasonable sounding Trump was in the debate last night, and I think we're beginning to see sort of a transformation of the kind of message that Trump has had, and he's been very outrageous, reality show-like during the primaries. But I think, as Ben Carson said when he endorsed him, there's another Donald Trump, and I think that if he can begin to pivot, it's going to allay some of the concerns, at least, that you're hearing from Silicon Valley and elsewhere.
And Sean, do you agree with that he's starting to pivot more toward a more mainstream, policy-oriented position?
I think, well, I'm not sure he's there at pivoting towards a policy-oriented position. I think he is reaching out to other people. As the field winnows, he's going to want to get their supporters along. I also agree that it's a little bit of a reality TV type of dynamic in this election cycle. Donald Trump actually had a reality TV show. He got a lot of media attention for himself, and I think his campaign has been driven in large part in a reality TV dynamic. So I think you're going to see more of that, and actually he has to keep that up a little bit to attract certain voters, at the same time attract more traditional voters. Interesting dynamic he's going to have to play.
And you've been involved in Republican strategy for a long time. You were also a White House press aide during the administrations of Presidents Reagan and the first President Bush. How concerned is the California Republican Party that Trump will win the nomination?
I think you have concerns. The California Republican Party is not monolithic. So you got a lot of grassroots activists. You saw Congressman McCarthy in Sacramento yesterday thinking that Trump actually could pick up 4 seats in the House for him. That's very interesting, particularly in a state that is so gerrymandered, to be honest with you.
And is that because McCarthy thinks that by having Trump in the race, more Republican voters will show up?
Actually, you will get more voters showing up. Republicans, unfortunately, in California, and it's happening to the Democrats too, more and more people are actually not identifying as Republicans, and they're falling off. Our voter registration has fallen precipitously, and people are going more and more to the independent camp. But at the end of the day, what you need is voters to show up and cast a vote for you. And he believes that you're going to get independents and more conservative Democrats that will come out with some Trump dynamic and get him additional members.
Sean, wouldn't you say, though, that because the Republican Party in California has been trying to rebrand itself a little bit after alienating especially Latino voters, and if you've got somebody like Trump at the top of the ticket, it's not going to help Jim Brulte and the Republican Party do that to broaden the tent for Republicans in California? Yeah,
I think that's a certain extent true, but I also think that people are underestimating the Latino vote, and they think immigration is driving all the Latino vote. Latinos now, recent immigrants and immigrants who've been here for a long time, actually have businesses that are not just small but medium-sized. Their vote is changing. And I will tell you something. The immigration issue, people tend to think monolithically in the Republican side in California sometimes, and at the Democratic level, that everybody's in love with, we'll just let every undocumented immigrant come into the country and we need to have amnesty. Actually, in large part, that's what drove Trump early on in this process, was coming out and being opposed to amnesty, and a lot of other Republicans were all over the map or couldn't get an answer down on that. You also have if you look across this world now, immigration issues all across Europe and across the United States that is dividing not just our country but our world. Until we get our arms around that, there's passion there, and when you have passion, people come out and vote. So I don't think this is the big winning issue that Democrats think it is with some Latinos. And I have to tell you,
if you look at the polls, I mean, I think his negatives are like 80% negative among Latinos.
They are, because he used inflammatory rhetoric when you talk about rapists and criminals and other things.
And
there are a lot of
wall.
Well, you know, building a wall, I would tell you, if you focus that down, I think you will find even a number of Latinos who aren't as opposed to that element. There's a lot of Latinos who came here, waited years, over a decade to immigrate here. They did it the right way, and they are bothered by people who can come in illegally. So I think there's a schism, but with Mr. Trump's rhetoric, I'm not sure you'll be able to break up enough of that in the Republican side and you just lump it all together.
Well, speaking of immigration, though, let's also talk about the H1B Visa issue. Trump has kind of flip-flopped on that. How are those issues playing out in Silicon Valley? How are Silicon Valley tech leaders viewing Trump? Well,
both of you guys, very good. Not in this last debate yesterday, although he was moderate and seemed to be pivoting a little bit to broaden his reach. But in the debate before that, he actually came out and said, you know what? I've rethought this HB1 visa thing. So he's reaching out. That's sending a little bit of a message to Silicon Valley. Is
he reaching out, or is he flip-flopping?
Well, you know, the truth of the matter is he's not a career politician, and he doesn't have a history of record on that. So he's got an ability that most of the other Republican candidates don't have, and that ability is to actually flip-flop, change positions. And, you know, people say flip-flopping is so bad or so wrong. I mean, Governor Schwarzenegger changed his views, too, and the public accepted that. People are willing to take an outsider who hasn't been involved in the political process and give them the benefit of the doubt that they're educated and learning. And I think he can play that for a long way.
Yeah, I think, though, that business generally, Thuy, they like predictability and stability. And when you look at a Donald Trump and the way he's waged his campaign so far, it gives pause and perhaps concern to especially the business community, Wall Street. I mean, he is unpredictable and sometimes very dramatic. And, you know, as Rubio said, I think, in the debate, you can think those things, and if you're not president or a candidate, you can say those things. But when you're president, if you are saying things constantly that are riling up the world, really, whether it's Muslims or other countries, that could be a problem.
So given that level of volatility and unpredictability, Sean, how much accuracy is there to reports that we're starting to hear about how some California Republicans are so concerned about a Trump nomination that they're actually now contacting the Democratic Party saying, we will work with you to help elect Hillary Clinton?
I think there are a lot of concerns, particularly among moderate Republicans in the Silicon Valley, with the Trump dynamic. And if Trump continued on the path that he seemed to be on before, we saw in the last debate, and what we saw in the prior debate, that they may pull the trigger. I have three concerns. Number one, you may actually get some Republicans, if he goes on, that actually come out and say, I'm a Republican for Hillary in Silicon Valley. That is a very unhappy, unhealthy thing for Republicans, and that will outsize its actual meaning on the election. Number two, and a big concern is moderate donors in California were historically known as the ATM of the country. We don't matter from an electoral perspective, but we sure do from a cash machine. Candidates come, the money goes out, ATM politics. I'm concerned that Mr. Trump won't be able to draw from a lot of donors in Silicon Valley as well as moderate Republican donors across the country. And Hillary Clinton, I'm 98.99% certain, is going to be the nominee. And he is going to need a lot of money to compete against her because she will get a lot of money.
All right, we will have to leave it there. Scott Shafer and Sean Walsh, thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
And Scott, also on presidential politics, want to stay with that a little bit. You interviewed Congressman Xavier Becerra about the Latino vote.
I did. He's a real rising star in the party, and I was curious to see what he had to say about what's going on.
All right, let's take a look at the interview.
Congressman Becerra, welcome.
Thank you, Scott.
So you're not as well known in the Bay Area as you are in your own district in Los Angeles. What should people know about you?
I spent several years in the Bay Area. Went to Stanford, both undergrad and law school. Born and raised in Sacramento, California. Parents are essentially immigrants from Mexico. I'm the first in my family to get a college degree at Stanford. My wife I met at Stanford. We now have 3 wonderful daughters.
You're a prominent member of the Latino caucus in Congress. Here in California, we've got 7 million people eligible to vote who do not register, and the vast majority of them are Latino. What's up with that?
A lot of it is understanding the process and believing in it. Remember, a lot of folks have come from countries where you were afraid to go vote. And when you did vote, you didn't have a choice. of the candidates. A lot of people have never really been incorporated into our process well.
We've got two leading Republicans running for president who are both Cuban American, Senator Cruz, Senator Rubio, both Latino, and yet they seem to be fighting over who has the strongest anti-immigrant credentials. What do you make of that?
This is America. I think it's in one respect showing that simply because you're Latino doesn't mean that's the only thing you care about and the only way you'll vote. At the same time, I think it also shows that voters becoming more discerning within the Latino community, and simply because you have a last name that says you're Latino doesn't mean you're going to automatically gain the vote of the Latino community.
Most people feel that in order for the Republicans to win the White House, they've got to get at least 30% of the Latino vote.
Well, if the Republican nominee for president garners 30% of the Latino vote this November, Hillary Clinton is our president. You cannot survive and lose by losing 70% of the vote of the fastest growing electorate in America.
Most people feel it's unlikely that the Democrats are going to take back the House, at least until maybe 2020, 22. That means you're going to be in the minority for a while. What can you get done as a minority member of Congress?
So, Scott, I think the conventional wisdom was that it'd be tough for Democrats to win back the House. More likely, people say, to win back the Senate, the 5 seats or so that we would need. We need 30 seats in the House. But I must tell you, the way Republicans have sucker punched the middle class and the way these Republican candidates for president have talked about people who work very hard and try to build this country, there's going to be some heavy wind blowing. And I think if it gets underneath the wings of Democrats who are running for office, I believe there's a very good chance that we could see not just the White House stay in Democratic hands, but Congress also flip and go back to Democratic majority rule.
I know that you thought about running for the U.S. Senate this time around. You were offered a post in the Obama administration, trade representative, but after he got elected, you turned it down. What are your ambitions? What do you want to do?
I know that I'm closer to my last days in elected office than I am to my first days, so I want to make the most of them. And I could have been part of the Obama administration. I believe that it was important to try to see if we could get health reform done, immigration reform, tax reform done.
But you only got one of those things done, health care.
Let me tell you, immigration reform is happening. It's going to happen. I say it to you, it's as good as done. This is the difficulty, the clock. As we say it's going to get done, there are a whole bunch of families who are being separated. There are Republicans and conservatives and anti-immigrants in this country, and some in power, who are like that kitten in that poster back in the 1970s, the kitten who had its claws out on the edge. It was edge of a ledge, and it was looking down, knowing that it was at some point going to fall from that ledge. They're going to lose that grip. It's going to happen, and it's a matter of when, not if.
You say it's as good as done. I've never heard anybody say that.
Mark my words. My dad was born in the U.S., but he is essentially an immigrant because he was raised in Tijuana in Mexico. His parents, my grandparents, would essentially work the fields of California. They picked every crop you can think of. My dad did as well. My dad, as a young man, would tell me the stories of the signs outside restaurants that said no dogs or Mexicans allowed. So a man who couldn't walk into a restaurant got to walk into the White House to meet the President of the United States.
All right. Congressman Becerra, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Scott.
And that was our own senior politics editor, Scott Shafer, talking with Congressman Xavier Becerra. Turning now to Silicon Valley. Already this year, many tech companies have been starting to see a slowdown, but you wouldn't know it from the thousands of tech workers being ferried to the peninsula each day. Meanwhile, Uber is facing legal challenges from drivers who claim they are employees, not contractors. And Apple's legal fight against the FBI over encryption is heating up. With us now to talk about these tech stories and more are San Jose Mercury News business columnist Michelle Quinn and Wall Street Journal technology reporter Doug Macmillan. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
So, Michelle, let's begin with the Apple case. Its ongoing battle with the feds over encryption on the iPhone used by the gunman in the San Bernardino mass shooting. The feds filed a brief this week, a point-by-point rebuttal against Apple. What did they say?
You know, the upshot was they said, forget about it. Everything that Apple's saying is suspect from every fact. They questioned every fact. They said this is not creating a backdoor. So they repeated that charge. They said that Apple's relying on First Amendment rights and Fifth Amendment. They said that's ridiculous. And they just took apart Apple's argument. Even the little rumor that that the feds had asked San Bernardino to change the to back up the phone and change the passcode. They were like, that wouldn't make a difference anyway. So basically, they dug in, and the rhetoric was really strong.
They basically accused Apple of flouting the law.
Flouting the law, lying, using this moment for marketing reasons. It was very aggressive. And yet, Apple themselves have used, this past week, they've used every platform they can to get their message out. So we're moving up toward a day of March 22nd, where there is actually going to be hearing about this case. Apple's going to get to reply one more time, and then that's it.
And of course, Apple has been making the argument, Doug, that they can't do this because it's a security issue. And if they build a backdoor now, then hackers could possibly get in as well. Is there argument swaying public opinion on this?
So interestingly, it sounds like Americans are almost equally divided on this topic. The Wall Street Journal actually published the results of a poll this week that said about 40% of registered American voters worried that the U.S. government won't go far enough to monitor terror suspects, essentially siding with the government here. 44%, so slightly fewer, worry that the government would go too far and violate privacy of its citizens, which is essentially supporting Apple.
You know, this is really interesting to me because this is a court case. So there's one judge who's going to make the decision. Why is this all being played in the so publicly? And I think it's because we're going to Congress. There's bills being discussed. I think that Feinstein introduced a bill this week making it illegal to kind of subvert a legal warrant. So I feel like we're kind of moving to this crescendo. This all typically is not played in the public realm, and yet it has been. Right. So what those people feel, I think, it really matters.
Yeah.
Well, the court of public opinion, right?
Yes.
Wanted to talk to also about another court case, this one involving Uber. An Uber driver in San Diego recently received unemployment benefits after Uber kicked him off its app as a driver. Tell us about that case, Doug.
So this driver essentially was kicked off the app and filed for unemployment. And it might be the first time in California, at least, that a former Uber driver was awarded unemployment, which essentially is like saying he was an employee, or at least is entitled to unemployment insurance that an employee would. Why was that? This regulator found that Uber's ability to fire him, kick him off the platform, kind of at will, was a form of control over how he did his job. So as you know, we've talked about before on this show, there are many different things that define employees and contractors. One of those is your control over their ability to do their job. And in this case, this regulator found that Uber exercised great control over his ability to do that job by firing him. It's not clear whether this is going to set any kind of precedent, but it sounds like more Uber drivers might be trying to follow him down this path and file for unemployment.
And the thing that other thing that's interesting about this case is that apparently the California EDD has a special form for rideshare drivers, so like 100 questions or something like that, like a questionnaire. So it seems like they're
thinking about this.
The regulators, different agencies in Sacramento are thinking about this. Meanwhile, this case is going on where a judge is going to decide about some of these issues. So
then, Doug, you kind of touched on this, and Michelle, maybe you can address this too. So is there or is there not precedent? What impact might this have on the class action suit that is now pending regarding Uber drivers in California? I don't know. Again, it's similar to the Apple case. Does it affect that it's new? There are data points here. There are data points. And so, we have labor commissioners making some findings about a Lyft and Uber driver. We have the California EDD. So there's various points. And Uber has rightly said, sometimes they find for us, sometimes they find against us. And yet we have different agencies in Sacramento whose job it is to figure out classification, coming to the conclusion that some of these people are employees.
And to the extent that these cases are almost all in the news and being played out, as you said, in the court of public opinion, I think there has to be some effect on the future cases and potentially on this really big one that's pending, this class action lawsuit. Another story that continues to make headlines is Yahoo, and Marissa Mayer, the CEO, gave an interview to Charlie Rose this week. Doug, what did she say? Does she expect to be around next year? So it's a strange time for her to do a big TV interview. As you know, Yahoo is preparing to auction off its core business potentially. They are, facing a proxy battle in which Starboard, a hedge fund, might nominate a whole new board of directors who probably would end up firing her, potentially end up firing her. And Yahoo continues to, morale continues to sink. The business continues to have poor performance. So why is she going on Charlie Rose right now to talk about pretty much, how great she's been doing, how the company is doing well? It's really confusing. It's a head scratcher.
Do you think she might be trying to convince investors out there that, hey, I still lead this ship, have confidence in me?
Yeah, I think she's mostly sending a message to shareholders and saying, give me more time. I need more time for this turnaround.
Her brand really kind of pumped that stock up at least the first 2 years. Do you think that it has any more value, that brand? I mean, can she say to shareholders, stick with me because I got you this far?
It's a good question. I think that people in the tech community, a lot of people I talk to, I think that she has lost a lot of credibility out here, at least. But when she plays on the big, national stage on a Charlie Rose show, maybe she still is a very intriguing, she's one of the most successful female executives in tech and in business, and maybe she still can, leverage that brand. But I think that her kind of insistence that her turnaround is working, and people out here look at the numbers and they look at the momentum that has been lost at Yahoo over the past few years. I think she's lost a lot of credibility.
I mean, whether she's right or not, the problem is that the momentum's gone under her leadership. Right. I mean, and life is not fair, and not even to Marissa Mayer.
Right. Well, and when you lose that momentum, it's really hard to get it back.
So just real quickly, in the 30 seconds or so we have remaining, what are the lessons learned here? I mean, Yahoo was once a pioneering internet search engine company.
I think one lesson is if you're going to take on a turnaround, you need to act decisively and you need to make big, bold bets. I think one of the main ways she could have done this a little bit differently is by cutting more of the workforce sooner so they could operate kind of more efficiently.
All right. Well, thank you both, Doug Macmillan with the Wall Street Journal and Michelle Quinn with the San Jose Mercury News.
Thanks.
Nearly all the drinking water in California meets or exceeds federal and state standards. But as a KQED reporter recently discovered, harmful contaminants can still lurk in tap water, especially in the Central Valley. Many of these communities are being exposed to high levels of 1,2,3-TCP, a cancer-causing chemical once found in a pesticide that has leached into groundwater. But neither the State Water Board nor the EPA regulates this chemical. Joining me now is Sasha Coca, KQED Central Valley Bureau Chief, to talk about this some more. Hi, Sasha.
Hi, Thuy.
Well, where does 1,2,3-TCP come from, and how did it end up in drinking water?
It was injected in the soil over many decades in farm country in California, places where people were growing crops and wanted to keep these little tiny worms out of the soil called nematodes. So in places where we've grown crops in California, mostly in the Central Valley, it has leached down into the groundwater. And
what are the health risks?
The state of California named this as a carcinogen back in 1992. It has been shown to cause cancer in laboratory animals, multiple tumors in multiple sites. There have been no studies on humans, but they extrapolate that data from animals. So it could potentially cause cancer.
So if this is a known carcinogen, why is it not regulated, and how concerned should we be?
Good question. It's been over 25 years on the Prop 65 list of cancer-causing chemicals, yet neither the state nor the EPA have rules about how much of this stuff should be in our drinking water. The state says it's in the process of finally setting a maximum contaminant level, and hopefully they will have that process underway by this fall, and we'll have a level finally by next spring. But until then, your water utility doesn't have to test for this, doesn't have to tell you whether it's in the water, and we actually don't know how big of a problem it is in California drinking water.
So if the water utility doesn't have to talk about it, how did you find out about this?
I live in the city of Fresno, and I probably read my water bill a little bit more closely than most people because I'm interested in this stuff.
You're probably the only one who reads your water bill.
And I saw this little tiny footnote at the bottom of my consumer confidence report on my water bill, and it said 29 wells in Fresno have detected 1,2,3-trichloropropane, and that it's been known to cause cancer in laboratory animals. I actually brought some of my Fresno water to show you, Thuy, and the thing is, you can't tell just by looking at the water that this chemical is in there. You can't smell it. It doesn't taste any differently. But I was worried. I have 2 young children, and I was worried when I heard that a cancer-causing chemical could be in my water. And I did get my water tested, and we did find that there was some 123 TCP present in my drinking water.
And were the levels high enough for you to be concerned about your safety and your children's safety?
So my particular water came in at 3 times above the public health goal set by the state. Folks at the state reassured me that that basically means I have a 3 in a million chance of getting cancer from drinking the water. So I'm probably more likely to get cancer from, breathing smog or secondhand smoke. But still, it is of concern. And there are wells in the Central Valley where the numbers are much, much higher, 100 or 150 times higher than the public health goal. And those communities are generally small rural communities where farm workers live, and they cannot afford to pay water rate increases to clean this stuff up.
So who manufactured this stuff, and are there lawsuits?
There are, in fact. So they've traced it primarily to 2 companies, Dow and Shell, both of which manufactured this product for a number of decades, starting in the 40s and in the 50s. And it essentially was a chemical byproduct that they ended up using as an ingredient in the soil fumigant. And some of their own scientists have admitted that, in fact, this was not an effective ingredient when it came to killing nematodes. So attorneys that are representing over 40 communities in California have been suing Dow and Shell, and they essentially say they should be the ones to clean it up because it's expensive to put in filtration to clean this stuff up, and small rural communities can't afford it.
So meanwhile, as that litigation is pending, just real quickly, when will there be some kind of regulation on this, and can the public weigh in?
The state has said that hopefully by next spring there will be regulation, and starting in the fall they'll be taking public comment. So if you're concerned about whether this is in your drinking water, especially if you live in an area that used to be farm country or is farm country, check your consumer confidence report, but also weigh in with the State Water Resources Control Board about what you want them to do when it comes to regulating this chemical.
All right, well, thank you for being vigilant about your water bill and bringing this to our attention. Sasha Coca, thank you.
All right, thanks, Thuy.
And that does it for us. I'm Thuy Vu. Thanks so much for watching. For all of KQED's news coverage, please go to kqednews.org.